next topic today is perhaps one of the most controversial to have been raised by Crowdsource the Truth, and I want to thank regular contributor Jared Beck for introducing me to our next guest, Louis Leo. Louis, Jared, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to
So we're
be
going to
here, Jason.
Yeah, and Jared, I'm really glad you're back. A lot of people have been sending me messages, very concerned about the well-being of your mother-in-law. She's doing well, I understand.
Yep, she's back home and in good spirits. So we really appreciate all the outpouring of support we've gotten from your viewers. It's been really wonderful. It's really helped us get through this very difficult time.
Glad to hear that. And we're going to be talking today about some of these really inflammatory comments that Alan Dershowitz made here on Crowdsource the Truth just about 2 weeks ago. You know, there's been an interesting wrinkle to this that just came to my attention maybe 2 days ago, which is that Netflix has just released a new miniseries called Filthy Rich, all about Jeffrey Epstein, that actually features Alan Dershowitz quite prominently. And I have really come to believe that Alan Dershowitz was planting a story with us, utilizing Crowdsource the Truth as a social engineering platform, perhaps to kind of seed the ground for the public to accept this notion of mandated vaccination. Louis, you've done a ton of work in this area. You're a lawyer, and well, why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself for people who perhaps haven't heard of you before?
Sure. I'm an attorney in South Florida. I do a lot of civil rights, and that's something I've only recently, just the past few years, really been focusing on, and that's what brought me into the vaccine, I guess you could call it, freedom movement, which ultimately is about medical freedom, and it's about not really anything new, although there's been a lot of effort, I think, by those who stand to gain from the mandatory vaccines, and of course, you know, the business models we're seeing turned into public policy. Ultimately, to make it seem like it's something new when it's really not. I mean, this goes back centuries, you know, to the early vaccinations, going back to, you know, the times of smallpox, and you know, just to bring up some history. You know, everyone talks about, for example, the Spanish flu, and you know, this was in 1918, I believe, but no one talks about what happened in 1919. I mean, I think we're seeing literally history repeating. There was this push to close businesses. There was mask mandates that were implemented back in 1918, and you
Huh.
know, everyone talks about the waves and talks about what was going on, and how people, stayed home, then came out, and then there was another wave, and they argue that means we should, you know, of course, you know, hide and follow CDC recommendations. But no one talks about what happened in 1919, like the anti-mask league that was started in San Francisco, which ultimately put an end to the mask mandates back then. And ultimately, it was the same exact issues. People were arguing that the science wasn't settled, that the data was not accurate, that the masks were not conducive to good health, and in fact were infringing upon civil liberties. And ultimately, in San Francisco, they put an end to the mask mandates. Yet here we are, you know, 2020, over a century later, facing the same exact issue, or at least the same exact deprivation of civil rights, which I think is a wake up call, because it's really not new. It's just the history repeating, and it stems from this corruption that has allowed for public health to become for sale to the highest bidder. And ultimately, now we're being told, you know, things like mandatory vaccines are not only necessary, but they're legal. Which, if you look at the history of the you know, opposition to the mandatory vaccination, that's not true. And I think Dershowitz doesn't understand history, or at least he's only focused on one, you know, case that's over a century old, and there's a lot more cases since then. There's been a lot more revelations in this, and not just U.S. history, but also in the scientific community. And if you go to more recent times, going back to 2011, the seminal case on this is the Dershowitz case. It ultimately deals with this notion that if you sue for an injury from a vaccine, you're forced into this program, the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. And in 2011, that program was essentially upheld as lawful. And of course, it brings up this issue of preemption, where you now are forced into this program, suing the government, seeking, money from a fund that is controlled by the government. And essentially, as you can
sorry,
see
Louis,
behind
let me
this,
pause you a second, because I think there's a lot of people who don't know anything about this. Can you tell us just a bit about this 1986 Child Vaccine Injury Act and how this all
Sure.
came about, how it transfers the liability from the actual profiting pharmaceutical companies to the taxpayers?
Yeah, if you look at the sign behind me, I think it's inverted. Is it
No,
backwards?
it looks normal.
It's normal. Okay, it looks inverted on my screen. So, anyhow, the sign says vaccine makers are exempt from liability, and that's something that happened in 1986. The Congress was ultimately legally, bribed into passing this sweeping legislation that ultimately took vaccines out of the realm of product liability. So put it this way: if any drug you take, your doctor prescribes you, it hurts you, it kills you, you would be able to not only sue the doctor. Pre 1986, this applied for vaccines. You would be able to sue the doctor. You'd be able to sue the manufacturer. And vaccines now, after 1986, have been carved out. You can't sue your doctor, or at least, I mean, you could sue them, but then they're going to move to dismiss, and it's going to be dismissed, and you're going to end up having to file a claim and get in line with all the other claimants. And ultimately, this is 1986 was the beginning of the end of the Constitution when it comes to your right to a jury trial, your right to, sue and hold responsible the person who actually hurts you. And now instead you have to get in line in this administrative process that is not really, a court. They call it a vaccine court, but it's not a court, because you don't get to do depositions, you don't get discovery, you don't get to, actually
let me slow you down for a second again,
differences.
because I know when lawyers start talking, there's terms that fly that you guys understand that the audience may not. And it's also important for people to know. They might say, oh, we've got two lawyers here. They want to sue doctors. They want to sue pharmaceutical companies. That's not what it's about. What you guys are suggesting is that the elimination of a potential plaintiff's right to sue absolves the manufacturer of any responsibility. And they could literally inject your child with gasoline, say it's a vaccine, your kid could die, and there's no recourse whatsoever. So by eliminating this threat of a lawsuit, it basically alleviates any responsibility. The vaccine manufacturers can do whatever they want. They don't need to test these things in the way that normal pharmaceutical products are. And this created a windfall of profitability in the pharmaceutical and biological industries. That's another important aspect of what was done. They don't just change the laws, they change the way these things are qualified. So instead of vaccines being pharmaceutical products, they became biological products, and that sidestepped all kinds of laws. A lot of people have been telling me about the Nuremberg Code and how that is going to... I could tell when Del Bigtree was interviewing Alan Dershowitz and Del started bringing up the Nuremberg Code, Dershowitz rolled his eyes. That indicated to me that Del was taking the conversation to somewhere outside of the court, outside of the law. There's an easy way around this Nuremberg argument. Jared, you're nodding your head yes. Am I correct in this?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just say something. I mean, it's not that there's no recourse at all against the vaccine makers. It's that the recourse has been drastically limited to what Lewis has been describing, which is this vaccine court, which is actually administered by the Court of Federal Claims in D.C. It limits the compensation that you can get very drastically. You don't get a jury trial. And I think the most important thing for purposes of this discussion is that the vaccine makers, if liability is found, in other words, if a vaccine is found to have caused an injury, they don't pay the penalty out of their pocket. It comes out of a fund which is funded by I believe it's a 75-cent tax on all vaccines that goes into this pot of money out of which compensation is made. So they don't feel the penalty in their pocketbook. And for every other industry you can think of, and you name it, I mean, think of the recent pharmaceutical cases involving opioids. Think of asbestos. Okay, how do we regulate dangerous products in this country? Well, we have a very robust litigation system on the civil side, which awards sizable damage awards when there are severe injuries, and the possibility of punitive damages when there is malice or gross negligence. And it creates a very strong incentive for manufacturers of products to manufacture their products in a safe manner and do the necessary testing so they're not killing people. That incentive has been entirely stripped away for the vaccine industry, and it was stripped away in 1986, as Lewis described. So when you're dealing with vaccines and you're dealing with the risk of vaccines, you're in totally uncharted territory as far as the legal system is concerned, because this is a unique way of handling these claims that really doesn't apply to any other industry in this country.
And it's completely secretive, which to me is one of the biggest problems, because in any other court in this country, unless the case has been sealed for whatever reason, it is public record. And so everyone could look at the science that's being used. Everyone can look at the experts that are testifying either on behalf of the claimants or on behalf of the government, essentially. And I think it changes the dynamic in a way that it's no longer really about the real issues, because in any product liability case, you're suing the manufacturer for the breach of their duty to make a safe product, or perhaps failure to warn a consumer about the dangers of that product. And I think when you look at the vaccines and how they injure people, we're seeing doctors who don't even know what's inside them, injecting children into the, with products, not just products, but, ingredients and products that are completely untested and perhaps should never even be in the human body, like mercury, which apparently there's no safe level of mercury in the human body, but suddenly when you put it in a flu shot, it's magically okay. And I think that we need to be looking not really to our courts, to make a real long story short, I think on what the problem is, because the courts, I think we can all agree, have been compromised by the corruption. We have federal judges who have been appointed for life, politically appointed, who perhaps have economic interests or have to do favors for people because they got where they were for a reason. And just to go back to this 1905 case, I really want people to look at that case, not just read the opinion, but look at who's writing the opinion. Jared, you probably remember what you were taught about the justice. I believe his name is Harlan. John Marshall Harlan. I mean, this is a gentleman.
Tell us about that guy.
You can just look at his Wikipedia. You'll see that this is a guy who comes from a family of slave owners.
Whoa.
Okay, it's kind of like, let's imagine Dershowitz for a second arguing that slavery is okay because Dred Scott. Everybody knows the Dred Scott case was the most ridiculous and perhaps the most tragic Supreme Court ruling in the history of the Supreme Court. So when people start quoting cases from 1905 as gospel, I think we need to stop and say, hey, wait a second. It's 2020. why are we talking about a case from 1905? And I saw in one of your interviews, you brought up a case in Texas, right? There was a Planned Parenthood case involving abortion. And ultimately, the Fifth Circuit ruled that, basing their arguments on, this is all based on Jacobson versus Massachusetts, that the government has this broad police power and can, of course, halt abortions, if it's to prevent diseases from spreading. And I think we need to ask ourselves, why is a court, or appellate judges looking at a 1905 case as the standard when deciding cases in 2020, right? When there's been a lot of scientific achievements. I mean, come on, think about what was going on in 1905. But
well, I want to ask you about that case specifically, because it's not just the age of the Supreme Court decision at 115 years old. The primary challenge that I'm posing to Alan Dershowitz, which remarkably he's refused to accept. I mean, I don't care if he dislikes me personally or whatever. He told me to look it up. He was very dismissive.
Dershowitz is dumb.
And I looked it up. And the thing is, even 115 years ago, they were talking about a vaccine that had been in use for 109 years prior to that. The smallpox vaccine had been developed in 1796. It's the first vaccine that was ever used. We can have a separate debate about the safety and the efficacy of the smallpox vaccine, but the fact is, by 1905, for whatever limitations society and medical science had at that time, there was 109 years of collective knowledge and experience with this vaccine that legislators could look to determine the overall safety, the overall efficacy, and then make a vote based on this established scientific understanding. Now, we're talking about a disease they didn't even know about until 4 or 5 months ago, a vaccine that's currently being developed, and the front runner being a vaccination technology that's never been tested before, that's talking about altering human DNA in a way that no scientist has any concept of how it will work. And my argument against Mr. Dershowitz, and this is what I wanted to ask you guys about, because I feel it's very important to stay within the context of the law and not bring in stuff like the Nuremberg Code, but just by the very letter of Mr. Dershowitz's own argument, the police powers cannot be applied arbitrarily or oppressively. And if they don't know what the result of this RNA messenger vaccination is going to be, isn't that the very definition of arbitrary? And doesn't that knock Dershowitz's argument right out of the box?
Can I just ask one question,
please,
you guys? And do either of you know how many people were killed by smallpox in the 20th century?
No.
Lewis?
I mean, I can Google it, but go for it, Jared.
300 million.
300 million.
300 million just in the 20th century.
So it's the entire population of the United States, essentially.
Okay, that's a pandemic. All right, that's a pandemic. How many people have died because of this coronavirus?
100,000 or 300,000 worldwide?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right.
The world may never know, but I have a question, Jared, also, and for you, Jason. How many of you guys were vaccinated for smallpox?
I think it's been eradicated by the time we were all born. It's the only disease to ever be eradicated or considered eradicated by inoculation.
Right. Well, that's what they say. They say a lot of things. Guys like Dershowitz say a lot of things about smallpox being eradicated, but the fact is, nobody in this conference right here had the smallpox vaccine because you couldn't get it in America because it was so unsafe. They prohibited it in the United States. Now, my understanding is that they may still do it elsewhere in the world, but this notion that it eradicated smallpox is completely false, and it's much like religion. You just say it and people are supposed to believe it. Same thing with polio. But as we see from Dr. Fauci's recent admission, polio still exists. Polio has just been redefined. It's just called something different, like there's a few of them: Guillain-Barré syndrome. There's different variations of things that they would have called polio, because they used to call anything with paralysis polio. You know what else? You know what else caused paralysis? DDT poisoning. So, it's there's a lot to it's a rabbit hole when you go down each of these diseases, because they each have their own history and they each have their own, players who stood to gain a lot from the production of these vaccines. And if you look at the business side of things, I think it becomes crystal clear. A lot of people say problem, reaction, solution. We're seeing, so much of that. And, my understanding is that each of these vaccines today, I'm not talking about smallpox, because I don't even think smallpox would really qualify as a vaccine this day and age, because they didn't inject you like they did, to me when I was a child. As a newborn, they would, scrape your skin and then take, the stuff from, an infected whatever animal, and they put it, into your skin.
Wow.
Now they're sticking a needle into your arm and sticking it into your bloodstream, injecting you with aluminum and formaldehyde and all kinds of things, aborted fetal cells, things that I don't think anybody would have ever considered injecting to themselves in 1905. So when Dershowitz talks about 1905, or anybody brings up Jacobson, I just want to say, wake up, dude. It's 2020. Catch up, because a lot has changed. And each one of these vaccines has serious issues, and we don't have to speculate. We can look at the vaccine inserts. I tell people, don't believe me. Ask your doctor to show you the vaccine insert. It tells you right there inside. I mean, these things you could paper your wall with just one vaccine product insert.
Right.
People aren't looking at this stuff. Let me give you some personal experience, okay? Because I didn't just, one day decide I'm going to go help people, who are vaccine injured, and parents of children who, can't speak anymore because they're autistic. I actually myself went down a very dark journey when I was deciding whether or not I wanted to vaccinate my own children. You have your pressure from your family. You have the pressure from everywhere in society. You have even the government telling you that you can't, you can't come to school unless you get a form signed. And so we started looking. And my spouse and I, we really did a lot of research. I think more research than most doctors do on these products, because we really wanted to understand them. And once we started getting into the nitty gritty and the stuff that no one talks about on TV, we really were shocked. And to be honest with you, it's kind of haunting to think of what we discovered that's not new. This stuff has been around for a long time. The vaccine injury program has been around for decades. And there's been, countless children injured, and there's been countless studies that have been ignored and buried. And it raised a lot of questions in my mind. I mean, we decided very early on not to vaccinate. I'm saying very early on in our research, we decided this is why. How could we do this? Because once you really can't go down that road. And people call us, people who learn the risk of vaccination, they call us anti-vaxxers.
Right.
Well, most of the people who are against or, fighting against vaccination or fighting for, medical freedom, they're not anti-vaxxers. They've been vaccinated. A lot of these people are ex-vaxxers. Okay. A lot of them don't even aren't really against vaccination in general, but they're for safe vaccination. They're for, holding these companies accountable and holding their doctors accountable. And just if I could share one more story, if you don't mind, when we were looking for pediatricians, the first pediatrician, okay, the very first one that we interviewed, we sat in their office. I'm not going to say their name, and they were a recommendation from family. We and not a new doctor. This is a pediatrician who's been around for a long time. He's probably vaccinated countless children over the years, decades. And we sat in a nice comfy patient area, whatever room, and I asked him. I said, Doc, what do you think about the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program? And do you know what his response was to me?
What's that?
Don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Even better.
That's what he said to me, and I'll never forget. We had that like awkward silence, and my spouse and I looked at each other, and we looked at him, and we're like, are you suggesting it's a conspiracy theory, doctor? I mean, this is commissioned by Congress. Like it's like, he didn't even know what happened in 1986. I mean, think about that. This is
Well,
a professional, a medical professional. He went to medical school.
but what you're talking about is a very important component of this, Lewis. It's the social engineering. Doctors, in addition to being very educated in the field of medical science as it's currently understood, they're human beings, and they're interacting with, mainstream news and social media, and they are subjected to the same exact type of brainwashing that Alan Dershowitz was doing to us. And forgive me for being persistent, but I'm really trying to get an answer to this. If I were the counsel for the defense or arguing against Dershowitz as he envisioned, not me being in the vision, but he envisions arguing for mandatory vaccination in the Supreme Court, my argument against him would be his thing cannot apply because the police powers cannot be applied arbitrarily. And the reason the Supreme Court might have been able to arrive at that decision in 1905 is that given the consensus of medical understanding at the time, 109 years of practice with a particular vaccine and the outcome it's had over 109 years relative to a particular disease, I believe a strong argument could be made that a lawyer who has no medical knowledge could make a judgment based on the judgments of a huge collection of 109 years worth of doctors. And similarly, governors, lawyers, Supreme Court justices cannot make that type of a judgment for a new disease with a new vaccine that's 4 or 5 months old using a technology that's going to modify DNA in a way that's never been tested. Isn't that arbitrary? Is that not meeting the legal definition of arbitrary?
Yeah, but good luck getting a judge who's impartial or is good luck getting to the Supreme Court because I mean, people don't realize how compromised. And I mean, honestly, I went into becoming a lawyer. I'm a young lawyer. I've only been practicing for about 10 years on my own, and I came into it thinking I could actually change the system. Or I could, with a big case, maybe I can, hold, corrupt officials accountable. But you come to find out really quickly how the rules of evidence have been weaponized. You come to find out how, all these things that guys like Dershowitz helped carve out in our system,
right,
over the years. I mean, come on, the 1986 vaccine injury compensation program was crafted by lawyers working for the pharmaceutical industries and the government, because there's really, almost no distinction anymore. People talk about the government, but I don't really see government anymore. I see corporations masquerading as government. Yeah. I see, officials and even judges who are not following the law and who disregard the Constitution, despite the fact they took oaths to defend the Constitution. So honestly, before we can even get to the Supreme Court on a case, we need to address the legal system. Yeah. We need to talk about how it's been manipulated, and we need to fix a problem, And I've been telling people for a while now, you're not going to change this law with a lawsuit. You're not going to stop the 1986 vaccine injury program by suing somebody or getting to the Supreme Court, which God knows how long that would take and how many children would suffer between, filing that lawsuit and getting to the Supreme Court if it ever happens, because they only take, a handful of cases out of, so many that need to be heard, But just to finish this one point, you need to actually repeal that law. You need to pass new laws. Right. You need to. And then we need sweeping reform of our courts, because these courts are not going to uphold people's rights. They're not going to, even if you pass a law that says you can sue a vaccine maker, you're going to be up against so many things. Think about this. When you get injured in a car accident, right, and you sue the person who hits you, right, there's insurance there. But legally, you're not allowed to talk about insurance. In fact, despite the fact that the person paying the bill is an insurance company, the defense attorneys are insurance defense lawyers. They're able to lie to the jury legally and make it seem like the defendant that caused the crash is the one who's going to be on the hook. Okay, so we have a jury system that's completely tainted, been corrupted by defense attorneys and insurance companies and pharmaceutical. Everybody in the whole line has completely changed our system to where it's no longer where you have a right to a jury trial. Now you got to jump through hoops, and maybe when you get to a jury trial, you'll get to prove your case, but you might have one hand tied behind your back, and you might not be able to tell the jury exactly what happened or what the issues are because there's a whole layer of illusion that's been concocted by lawyers like Dershowitz. I mean, that's who came up with this stuff. This is before I was born. I mean, 1986. I graduated 1986. I was 2 years old. I was one of the guinea pigs. Along with all of my, family and friends over the years. So honestly, I want to know how many shots that Dershowitz had. I want to ask him, did he have a smallpox vaccine? Did he have the polio shot? He talked about, I think in another interview, he was maybe with Big Tree, he was talking about his grandchildren. He was talking about how he would get the shot. You know what? Let's live stream it. Let's see him actually go get that coronavirus shot. Be the first in line to be an experiment. And it's to me, I don't believe it because actions speak louder than words. And I think we're dealing with people who don't have vaccine injured children. They didn't lose a family member to something like cancer, like leukemia. And where did these things come from? Where did these cancers that nobody had ever seen before the vaccine program started come from? I'd like to see Alan Dershowitz answer those questions. I'd like to see him sit down and talk to some of the family members of victims of this program who have been excluded from the vaccine injury compensation program because they did not file their claim in time. Wow. And when you look at autism, when I found out that most people are not diagnosed with autism until that window has closed on filing a claim. And when I found out that they're denying claims by lumping them all together and treating them as if they're the same, right? And then you find out that if they have, there's actually there's this recent case actually where it came out that they were denying claims in bulk essentially because if they admitted that those claimants were harmed by the vaccines, it would bankrupt the program. They don't have enough money. They simply don't have enough money to pay all these claims. Wow. And that's why they passed the 1986 Act. They passed it because the vaccine manufacturers were telling Congress, and sending out campaign contributions, but telling them, look, if you don't give us immunity and change this so that we can't be sued, then we're going to stop making vaccines. They ultimately, I mean, that sounds like extortion in a way. I'm sorry if you.
Well, I'm sure they also lobbied and paid money into various campaigns. I mean, the big problem really is when they enable a law like this. First of all, this specific law created a windfall for the pharmaceutical companies, and it fills their financial coffers with more money to pay more lawyers to fight these challenges and to fund more campaigns and more advertising to get more vaccines made. And to your point, Louis, when I was born, in the 70s, I got far fewer vaccines than I'm sure even you did because the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act made vaccines such a profit center for Big Pharma that they just went absolutely nuts creating them. Jared, you had something to add.
There's hundreds lined up, waiting to be approved right now.
Louis packed so much in there, and he said something that I wanted to pick up on, which is really identifying Dershowitz's complicity and people like Dershowitz's, their complicity in this monster that's been created. And Jason, you stared into the belly of the beast when you had him on your show. And I think we got we got a sense of what this guy's all about. But I just want to make one quick point. The mainstream media likes to hold up Alan Dershowitz as this civil libertarian, sort of the civil libertarian hero of the United States, standing up for our civil rights. And Dershowitz likes to. I mean, he's such a name dropper. He even admitted that to on his show. But he likes to say that, oh, I have no political leanings one way or another. I'll get up and defend Trump in Congress, even though I'm a Democrat and I love Hillary Clinton, blah, blah. This guy doesn't give a shit about civil liberties. Okay. He only cares about the rights of people who pay his fat bills. And he said as much, that Jeffrey Epstein paid him a lot of money to defend him and get him that sweetheart deal so that he could basically have a legalized child prostitution ring in Florida. And Dershowitz is proud of that. And who are the other people he represented? Well, another great example, Klaus von Bülow, that aristocrat in the 80s. I don't know if people remember that. And then, of course, O.J. Simpson. I'm not saying people like that don't have the right to a vigorous criminal defense, but when has he ever stood up for somebody that can't pay his fat bills? That's what I want to know. I think he's a fraud. I think he's a despicable human being. I believe we are in a wartime posture in this country, and that the war is finally hitting our shores. I think you had a great show about Minneapolis before this one, about what's going on there and the strange occurrences that are going on in the wake of that horrific police incident. But when you're in a wartime posture, you gotta figure out who the enemies are. And I considered Alan Dershowitz to be an enemy of the American people by virtue of his defense of this vaccine industry, which has wreaked so much harm on Americans, especially Americans of younger generations, such as me and Lewis and our children. I also have young children. I made a different decision from Lewis. Elizabeth and I vaccinated them. Thankfully, we haven't seen any ill effects from that decision, but it was a very painful and torturous decision. You get a lot of shit from people if you even bring up the issue of vaccinations. I remember when I used to have a Facebook account. This was back in 2016. Just having a political discussion about who people had voted for president, and I mentioned I had voted for Jill Stein, and the immediate response from a fellow attorney who I used to work with in LA was, oh, well, she's an anti-vaxxer. How can you vote for Jill Stein? Which is just absolutely disgusting. And the fact that they have targeted our children and they have wreaked harm on our children. The U.S. has the third highest autism rate in the world. Obviously, something is going on here.
Oh, yeah. And we're on track. Just to chime in on that, Jared, we're on track for 1 in 2. Okay.
Wow.
Half
1 in 2
people,
children getting autism, you're saying?
If we continue, honestly, maybe there's been a fork in the road with this whole, pandemic thing, because I heard a lot of people now aren't vaccinating. They're not going to the doctor. They're not leaving their house. Right. So, which may be the silver lining here. Honestly, it's freaky to say that, but
well, and not to digress, but let me just, because Jared brought up something, and I want to come back to the vaccine stuff, but he was talking about Facebook and he was talking about all this social media stuff, and just a few hours ago, Trump has signed this executive order. The birdcage liner of the Washington Compost is couching this in a statement that is not entirely accurate. They're saying that it's to punish social media companies for how they police content. I think they've changed this headline. When I saw it earlier, it said that these legal experts consider it unconstitutional. But what he's really done is he's rectifying, as you said, Lewis, a problem with this 1996 Communications Decency Act law, which was Section 230, was created at a time that the internet was new, and it was intended to basically promote technology and business, but it did not envision the rapid growth of this technology becoming such an integral part of day-to-day life. What this essentially says is that just like if somebody called you up on the phone and threatened your life, you could not sue Verizon for allowing that phone call to happen, even if the person on the phone is saying and doing things that are illegal, because Verizon merely operates the phone. But if Verizon got involved at the level where they were deciding which phone calls to connect based on what the content of the phone calls were, they then become an editor of content. The Washington Post decides what gets printed in the Washington Post. So if they print a false story about Louis Leo or Jared Beck or Jason Goodman, we can sue them for defamation. But these social media companies are protected by this Communications Decency Act, Section 230, as simply operators of a network in the way that the phone company is. Yet, unlike the phone company, more like a newspaper, they're getting involved in removing content they find objectionable, censoring individuals who say things that don't agree with their vision of what is true or correct. And it appears to me that what Donald Trump is doing with this executive order is eliminating the lawsuit protection, very similar to what you're describing with the Vaccine Injury Act. He's just making these social media companies open to legal retribution should they do something that violates somebody's rights. I can tell by the look on your face, Louis, that you haven't really dug into either of these things, and I know lawyers are very reluctant to comment on things they haven't studied, but what's on your mind?
I definitely want to say something about censorship, because we've been experiencing this for years. I mean, everyone, pretends like, this is something new. And I think that's maybe natural for people who haven't been paying attention. But, going back to, I remember the Obama Romney campaign, I posted on, my page, People Over Politics, a picture of my ballot. And it was one of the most popular memes I've ever shared. And all it said on the meme was, you have more than two choices. And that went super viral, but next thing you know, the timeline for my page disappeared. The post, seemingly was like stopped, and I think it was around, that election that we saw the first real tampering. Okay, if we're going to talk about, Facebook interfering in the marketplace of ideas or other sites, I think it goes back. I think it's been going on for a long time, and it's been ignored because the powers that be, especially those who win the elections, benefited from it. So, I mean, unfortunately for like the third party candidates like Jill Stein, I voted for her too. They've been censored and suppressed more than anybody. So for anyone who thinks that this is targeting Trump and this is new, talk to Jill Stein, talk to the Gary Andersons and the what's his name, Johnson, about what they experienced back, and these people aren't even allowed to debate. I mean, come on, like we need to expand the debate is what I've been saying since that election, and we need to start looking at Section 1983 and start applying these old civil rights laws that have been collecting dust to Facebook and to Twitter.
Oh, wait a minute. You guys just got knocked out. Hang on.
These people aren't even allowed to amend these laws to start treating these sites like public forums, because that's what they are. They're public forums, and they need to be treated as such. I think that there's a lot of ways that you could turn these sites into more honest and transparent places where there are due process and posts just can't be deleted. But we know they're not going to police themselves. I've heard of like a Santa Clara principle, I think was proposed. There's all these, efforts to try to get these people to respect free speech. But, I go back to the First Amendment. If you apply the First Amendment to these sites, then they lose. They lose every time, because they're completely arbitrary with what they delete. They're picking and choosing the content that they want to highlight, and I think there's already the legal framework in place. We don't have to reinvent the wheel or create new avenues for people to sue. This kind of circles back to this notion, though, that if we bring these cases against these companies, we're going to have a fair trial. We're going to get to court. I mean, but that's just not going to happen. Because there's so many obstacles that you have. You got to get past the motion to dismiss, like Jared knows all too well.
Guys, I'm sorry. I just got to tell you for one quick second, Louis.
You can't even do a deposition.
hang on one second. So what happened was we had a crash on Skype, and I'm just trying to bring you guys back on. I've created this redundant system that prevents the show from totally stopping when that occurs, but it always seems to happen at the most inopportune time. So we're just a couple seconds away from getting back
we're
to
talking about censorship, of course.
Exactly. I'm certain it's a coincidence, but we're very close.
Are we live streaming or?
We are indeed.
Okay.
So give me just one quick second. I'll bring you guys back on and we'll continue the conversation here. I just want to make sure that people don't get blasted with feedback while we do that. So here we go. Okay, we'll have you guys back in just a moment. Okay, I think you should be able to hear me again now. Do you?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so we can carry on the conversation there. Very sorry, gentlemen. So, Louis, you were speaking about.
I see you have my video from Daytona 500 up here.
Yeah. Why don't we go to that? We can speak about some of your activism that you've been involved with. Let me run this video here, and we can just chat about it as it plays.
She doesn't know what, but something is wrong. That's right. It's the diminishing civil liberties and medical freedom and informed consent. All of that's being replaced with mandatory, dangerous pharmaceutical drugs. Why? Who benefits? What happened to freedom in the land of freedom? What happened to informed consent? Why can't you sue a vaccine maker if it injures or kills you? Who benefits from that? Why are vaccine makers exempt from liability? These are just questions we want answers to. Over $4 billion paid to injured and dead children.
Some people were threatening you here, right? This guy in the red shirt.
And just because a vaccine didn't kill you doesn't mean it saved your life. Thanks for stopping by.
That was my favorite part right there. He goes,
That's what I wanted to show. Yeah, that guy. So what was it that he said to you, Louis?
I got mine and I'm fine.
Yeah, the jury's still out on that.
I hear this all the time. I hear it all the time. It's an anecdotal fallacy. People think that just because they got a vaccine and they didn't die, that it saved their life. It's not logical. People, and that's people have really lost sight of what logic is. Maybe they need to take a logic course because everyone uses fallacies all the time, especially in the vaccine realm. Vaccines save lives. Okay, can you point to one person that we can actually prove the vaccine actually saved their life? They make this up, and it's like religion. It's like a mantra that they tell themselves to make themselves feel better about, injecting themselves to their children. But the reality is that the vaccine is prophylactic. It's a preventative measure that people take. So if you look at the vaxxed, or vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies that are out there, and just talk to people, who have children who are vaccinated, and talk to people who don't vaccinate. I think you'll start to see that these things like asthma and diabetes and all kinds of issues that children have, you're not finding this in children who aren't vaccinated. And that's something we need to have a discussion about. I think that we need to. Honestly, there's this. People bring up the Nuremberg Code. My understanding is that doesn't apply to the United States, or
right.
that the United States is exempted from it.
Right.
But there are a couple principles that I think we should be enforcing in the United States, like the fact that anyone who's subject to an experiment, right, has to have voluntary consent. And anyone who is the subject of an experiment has the right to stop it. Okay, it should end. And I think the vaccine program is one big experiment. Okay, and every single vaccine is also an experiment. And if you look at how they approve these things and what's called post-market review, I think you'll start to agree that this is not okay. Where they're approving a shot, and then just watching to see how many people get hurt or killed or whatever,
right.
And then they can make adjustments or something. But
I'm glad you brought that up, though, because this was the argument that Del Bigtree made and many people are making. And I could just tell by the look on Dershowitz's face when Del brought that up, it's not something that would apply. It's not something that would control in a federal court. It could be something you refer to while making an argument, but it's not really going to sway a judge. And I think that's why Dershowitz became dismissive in his posture when Dell started speaking about it. So what I'm kind of trying to do is educate myself and the public by speaking to legal experts like you guys as to how this argument needs to be made. Because, forgive this pun, borrowing from the medical industry, but winning a lawsuit is a surgical operation. You can't just go in there with your feelings or what's right or what should be. It's got to comport with what is established, and it's got to comply with the law, which doesn't often make sense.
I think we need to stop looking to guys like Dershowitz or you know, to be honest with you, I think he's a waste of time, because ultimately he's not a legislator. He's not somebody who has any power to actually change the legal framework or to
Right.
To remove bad laws, right? Because I think we need to really start looking at the laws that have been lobbied for and essentially put into place. 1986 is just one of them. Let's talk about Florida statutes 381.00315. There's so many laws that they've over the years put in place to create the framework that Dershowitz can say exists and can be used.
Quick point, because Lewis, I think, just brought up some really important things we have to consider, and I just want to tie this back to the executive order that Jason referred to that Trump signed today regarding social media. And while we've been talking, I've been looking through it. And while, I might have drafted it a little differently, I think it's a good start to getting around this really onerous Communications Decency Act, which has provided extraordinary immunity to social media companies like Facebook, Twitter, you name it, and holding their feet to the fire when they engage in censorship and when they, discriminate and when they engage in defamation themselves. I think it's a good start. And this wasn't done through Congress. Okay, this was done through Trump's pen. Okay, and honestly, I don't think you even need to go through Congress for something like the egregious, horrible things that we're dealing with when we talk about the unregulated vaccine industry. You could start making changes by executive order. So really, it may, the battle here may best be waged by getting the ear of whoever the president happens to be, and getting them to issue a powerful executive order of the nature of this executive order that Trump issued today. It could be that simple.
And on that point, Jared, let me ask you this. Because the New York Times, I mean, again, I think we've got, pretty dopey liberal journalists, use that term generously, interpreting the law. The New York Times is saying that Trump's order on social media, could harm one person in particular, Donald Trump. Here's where they make a statement that I believe in your parlance, gentlemen, would be considered conclusory. They're saying without certain liability protections, companies like Twitter would have to be more aggressive about policing messages that press the boundaries like the president's. Actually, my interpretation differs than the New York Times. I think the only way Twitter would be able to operate if Trump's executive order holds is that they would have no ability to police any tweets. And if someone tweeted something that violated the law or broke a civil tort, it would involve the person posting the tweet and the person who objected to the tweet. The only thing that Twitter would have to do would be to disallow people from basically doing this type of social engineering and defamatory statements from anonymous accounts, which they actually enable.
Right. Well, look, I mean, in other words, Twitter would become more like Gab, which, by the way, I highly encourage people to.
It would become more like Verizon, where messages just go out and they don't do anything with the messages.
Right, and here's the thing. I mean, you're going to get all these arguments from the New York Times and the Washington Post and all this other garbage propaganda that's going to say that what Trump did is unconstitutional. He's subverting the powers of the legislative branch by legislating from the Oval Office, yada, yada, yada. Here's the bottom line about that. we have been a country largely governed by executive order for a long time. Congress's prominence in the promulgation of laws that truly regulate our country has actually diminished quite a bit as just a matter of fact. And we've become a country not only governed by executive orders, and if you look at the number of executive orders that presidents in recent history before Trump, going back to Clinton, Obama, Bush, I mean, they've issued tons and tons and tons of executive orders, which have never been deemed unconstitutional or a subversion of the legislative branch. And and that's also in addition to all the agency regulations out there, which are also part of the executive branch that, whether you're talking about the EPA, the FDA, the Department of Energy, you name it. I mean, they're issuing regulations constantly that have nothing to do with Congress, and they act as law. So again, I would just say that we've reached a crisis point in this country on a lot of issues. I think, vaccines are really at the forefront of that, and they make me especially angry because they target our children, and I just can't get over that fact. The executive order may really be the only way to go here in terms of rectifying the situation. I certainly agree with Lewis that the courts are probably going to be a dead end because the roadblocks are severe. Any lawyer who actually practices in the system and not just like some name-dropping ass licker like Dershowitz who only take plum gigs for famous people will tell you that it's a demoralizing disaster right now at every level. And Lewis and I are not like outliers. Okay, I mean, the morale is very, very low among lawyers and litigators these days, and it's even gotten lower in the time I've been practicing. I've been practicing since 2004, but it's rough going out there in the courts, folks.
Let me take you guys back to our core topic, and I want to celebrate a little bit of a legal win for Lewis. He recently appeared before the county commissioners board, and he had a major effect on what's going on there in Florida. Let's give a listen to this.
Louis Leo IV, followed by Rachel Eade.
I trust Dr. McNabb. I'm not. My name is Louis Leo. I'm a trial lawyer and founder of Florida Civil Rights Coalition. I hold a Juris Doctor, graduated with honors, and played college baseball. Before our ballparks were closed, I coached my son's baseball team in Boca Raton, which my law firm sponsors. I grew up playing baseball in South Florida, and I am now raising two young aspiring athletes who would like to follow in my footsteps, but may not be able to. Never thought I'd say that. Now, countless healthy children are not able to play sports or practice with their teams. They can't go to school or socialize. They must learn and interact with peers virtually. They can't exercise constitutional rights. Many sports, which are consensual activities with inherent risks and dangers to fans and players, are now prohibited under the guise of disease prevention. In a recent email, Vice Mayor Weinroth asked me two questions. Question one, what is my position relative to the activities mandated or restricted? My position is our community is suffering, but not from a novel virus. It's suffering from unconstitutional orders, which should never have been considered by officials who swore oaths to defend the Florida and U.S. constitutions, including the First Amendment, free expression, and free association. I do not presently know anyone who has suffered or died from contracting coronavirus. However, I do know many who are suffering today from losing jobs, isolation, depression, divorce, and CDC recommendations that have become unconstitutional mandates. Our friends and family are now unable to enjoy life and pursue happiness. If you are sick or afraid, if you want to social distance and stay home or wear masks, you're free to follow CDC recommendations. That is your right as an American citizen. But nobody, especially public officials who swore to protect and defend that right, has the right or authority. I've heard a lot of talk about authority. You don't have the authority to force citizens, whether they are healthy or sick, to stay home or stand anywhere, let alone 6 feet apart, or to wear masks, or to use or inject themselves or their loved ones with any CDC-recommended products. If consenting people, whether they're healthy or suffering from physical disability, wish to congregate and exercise their rights to live free and, yes, even die free, public officials must support, defend, and protect that right in the United States of America. Question number 2. I was asked, what would I do as a decision maker today in the face of statistical information being provided by WHO, CDC, FLDOH? I would remember what's on the board on the first day of my college statistics class. Statistics lie. May I have a moment to finish?
Do you have anything else to say? That's my question to you.
Yeah, I'm just answering Vice Mayor's question. I would carefully examine and question stats and recommendations from unethical sources whose products or treatments have caused injuries and deaths. What would I not do? I would never mandate harmful products, no matter who recommends them, because where there is risk, there must be choice. I would not mandate social distancing or restrict Americans' constitutional rights to free expression and free association. And when faced with an unprecedented mass deprival of civil rights under the guise of disease prevention, I would not consent or acquiesce. I would remember sunlight is the best disinfectant. And since experts say sunlight and heat kill viruses quickly, I would not close our beaches or parks. I would remember my oath, the oath you all took, to support, defend, and protect the U.S. and Florida constitutions, which supersedes all unconstitutional edicts. I would remember Florida Constitution, Article 1, Declaration of Rights, Section 2, Basic Rights.
Sir, your time has expired, but Vice Mayor Weinroth does have a question for you.
Absolutely.
Or a comment, so you're recognized, sir.
I'm going to just say, if you had one more minute, what would you finish up with?
1 minute. If you would like me, if you would allow me, I would read what Article 1, Declaration of Rights, Section 2, Basic Rights says, because I think a lot of people have forgotten it. May I read it?
Please.
And then I have a question for you.
Continue.
Again, Article 1, Declaration of Rights, Section 2, Basic Rights, available online for everybody, Florida statutes. All natural persons, female and male alike, are equal before the law and have inalienable rights, among which are the right to enjoy and defend life and liberty and to pursue happiness, to be rewarded for industry and to acquire, possess, and protect property. No person shall be deprived of any right because of race, religion, national origin, or physical disability. It's there in black and white. Now, we the people ask the Vice Mayor, the Mayor, and all other public officials and citizens in our county and state alike, what will you do today? Will you end this constitutional crisis? Will you end the lockdown and unconstitutional restrictions on our inalienable rights? Will you reopen Florida today? Thanks for your time, and we do look forward to your response.
Louis, that is just
Please
an
refrain.
absolutely historical speech that you gave there before the Board of Commissioners, and I think that people might be missing the irony. I didn't catch it the first time out, that you're presenting it in front of a body of seats that say don't use this seat because we're social distancing.
Oh, man. You notice when that started, I was walking up, and just to kind of give you some background on how that they had structured it, there was 2 podiums, one on each side of the room. And before I was speaking, there was a gentleman at the podium closest to where I was sitting who was a doctor. He was, crushing the Florida Department of Health stats and coming with a lot of truth that, it's worth watching actually that entire meeting just to hear all the public speak about not only these mandates and restrictions, but also on what's going on. But they had instructed everybody to alternate podiums. So they wanted me to walk across the room to the other podium while the clerk goes and takes off the microphone cover. They had these little covers. They kept swapping them out and then spraying chemicals all over the podium before you walk up there. So if you watch that, there's a little awkward moment. I'm walking up and she's walking up to the podium to go spray some chemicals. And I'm like, whoa, that's okay. I trust Dr. McNabb.
Yeah.
And it was, very Twilight Zone in there. Not just because of the social distancing thing, but the whole, this mask thing is just, you got all the commissioners. You notice they weren't wearing masks. And if you you look at the health department director, Dr. Alonso, she's not wearing a mask when she comes in there to give her update, and of course to advocate for the mask mandate that they're trying to force on people. It was to me just I think that the setting itself, and you could see as I'm speaking just how dystopian our city government has become. It's really what motivated me to go speak in the first place. And honestly, I wanted to speak to my city council. I spent a lot of time watching, both the city council and the county officials meetings to understand, where they were at and why they were doing what they were doing before I went there to ultimately teach them the law. And just so you know, I before they shut down the Delray Beach Library, which I believe is now finally open again, I would teach civil rights, and Jared actually graciously joined me for a talk, that's really what I do. That's why I started the Florida Civil Rights Coalition.
That's actually where I met Lewis, was at that talk that he had me attend, and it was on the vaccination topic. And there were it was not that many people attended, but the ones who did, if I recall, Lewis, they were throwing a lot of shade on us for doubting the good intentions of the pharmaceutical and vaccine industry.
How could you doubt
I remember
that?
it was mostly an older crowd too. I've noticed the older generations, many people only had one or two shots in this generation, the older folks, and they don't understand that children today are getting more than one shot on the first day of life, and ultimately the schedule now has over 70 70 vaccines. I ask people all the time when they're like, "Oh, vaccines save lives." I'm like, "How many did you have? Did you have 70? Did you have as many as the children are having today? And if you didn't, then shut up, because you don't get to have say in something you don't understand. And you can have your opinion about how it might have been when you were a child, but if you don't understand, like I don't think Dershowitz understands the nature of the program anymore, and has done the research to see just how many shots they're giving children and newborns whose brains are still, their brain barriers.
Their immune systems aren't formed. Their brains aren't yet formed. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked. And I can tell you, Lewis, right now, you're an absolute hero in the comments here. A lot of people are asking what the response was. And I want to show this. Just a day ago, Palm Beach County government said that you don't need to wear a mask in government buildings. And there are some other things that have happened as a direct result of your presentation there. Tell us what the result was so far.
Let me, this was just yesterday, so I just found out about this as well. But going back to that, this was early May, I believe it was the 5th. It was a Tuesday. We went to the meeting, and during the meeting, I sensed. Let me just tell you, I sat there for, I think it was nine hours. We were there for the whole day. We showed up early in the morning. They told us that we weren't going to be able to go inside if we didn't get there and at a certain soon enough. And they had limited capacity, which is ultimately another issue. That they're using this pandemic to stop participation, public participation, and almost every level of government. And it's
a slap situation.
Yeah. Well, think about this. That day that from that meeting was the first meeting that Palm Beach officials even had. I think going back, that was in May. It was several weeks before they actually had a public meeting where you can actually speak. So, once we got the opportunity to get in there, and you can't do this in Broward, by the way, or some of these, commissioner meetings, in South and other parts of South Florida, because they've completely, eliminated that feature. They're having closed door meetings, which is arguably a violation of Florida law, which requires open government. Yeah, I have a joke. Sunshine laws don't shine on a lot of stuff that it should in our government. I think people need to start looking at their if you're in Florida, look at Florida statutes, because if we don't need a new framework. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and draft new laws.
They just need to follow the law.
follow and apply it to all these people who have forgotten it, forgot their oaths and forgot that they serve the people, that they're totally, I mean, let me just go back to this meeting. You have these officials who are, if you watch that meeting, it's disturbing because there was at one point the mayor and the vice mayor got into it. They're arguing about a Palm Beach Post article, and public comment was supposed to happen at like 2:00. It got pushed all the way to, I think I didn't speak till about 4:00.
Wow.
But right before, and if you watch this, I think you're gonna just you're gonna understand what we experienced. But they suddenly, the mayor says, okay, we're about to do public comment, but we're gonna limit it to 1 minute for people who want to speak. And everybody, I mean, the crowd went wild. I mean, I saw, people, yelling at the mayor. Well, we sat here the whole day, listening to you, and you're going to now like censor us. How about censorship? This is supposed to be a 3 minute, everybody gets 3 minutes, and here they are trying to reduce that to 1 minute. And it just shows you, they really have no respect for people's rights to participate in government and local, government especially. It's become, tyrannical in the way that these people are operating, and they're no longer, following the framework that's been in place, for a long time. To give people an opportunity to participate in that process,
It's interesting they weren't
going to open the county. Let me just be clear. I mean, it wasn't until the public spoke at the meeting, and there was some amazing speeches. I think some were just as passionate, if not more compelling from mothers. There was one mother who brought her child, and he spoke. And about how it impacted him, and he gave some amazing health advice. A child giving better health advice than the director of the health department. And I think people need to start paying attention to what's going on. I mean, you have people who should not be directing health departments, and if you look at them, they don't look healthy. Okay,
right?
And
good point.
They don't look healthy. Look at Dr. Alonso. She claims to have played beach volleyball and been a fan of the beach, but is advocating to close the beach. And honestly, I think there's a war on science in this country, and maybe it's in the world too. So we need to really, I think start looking at who these people are. Those who are, enacting these unconstitutional, draconian measures, CDC recommendations. When did the CDC, which is, this isn't the government, okay? This is not, their recommendations don't have the effect or the force of law. Yet here we are acting like it does. And I think it's important for anyone, not just an attorney, to remind people of who these people really are and what's been going on, because most people have been burying their heads in the sand, or maybe they're paid not to care about it or to do anything about it. So, just going to that meeting, I'll try to be quick, but they essentially weren't going to do anything to reopen the county. And then everybody was saying, we need to reopen. And they weren't even sure if they could. And they said, well, we need to ask the governor to do this. So it took them a couple of days to write a 4-paragraph letter. They send the letter to the governor on Thursday, and Friday, Governor DeSantis shows up in Palm Beach County, interrupts a meeting. They were having a meeting on Friday to discuss opening the beach and to have the public weigh in, and they have lifeguards and everybody, and they're worried about social distancing and should we let people go to the beach? Questions that I really don't understand why we're even asking these questions, because people have a constitutional right to go to the beach. Okay, they have the constitutional right to travel. Yet somehow now they're playing policeman. We're gonna and be like parents, punishing children for doing things that we don't like. I don't know what happened,
and rallying the public against an individual. I mean, they've just today decided you can't even go outside without a mask on. So I'm now relegated to sitting inside the.
It's disturbing, and I'm representing 2 Americans who were arrested at Miami Beach this Memorial Day weekend. I'm representing them pro bono after they were arrested for simply walking on the beach. Meanwhile, there's a gentleman named Raven who has an access pass. He can go on the beach and run every day. So
why does he have that? How did he get that?
He's a famous celebrity.
He's famous. So, remember what I read from the Florida Constitution? Apparently, that doesn't apply anymore. Not all, men and women are not equal before the law anymore. And I think that's the bigger issue. But look at what happened in Palm Beach, and I think it sets an example for what the public can do participating in local government. They came to the commissioners. They voiced their grievances, petitioned for redress, and here you have now within a week the county's open. DeSantis shows up and says, you know what? These are smart people. We're going to let them open.
Incredibly well done.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for letting us open our county.
And well, that was very well done by you, Louis.
They opened the beach without restriction, which is a big deal considering, if you go down south, you can't go to the beach. You get arrested. So, and now, of course, they're not going to have social distancing and mask mandates, which they should never have considered in the first place because of the First Amendment.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. So we're just about out of time. I got to thank you both. This has been an incredibly important show, very educational, very informative, and congratulations on this small victory that's actually a large victory. I have just two questions. Now, the first question is, where can people see that full video of the presentation? Would it be on your website? peopleoverpolitics.org.
You see that top left there, that picture of some guy with a mask?
This?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so people can go to peopleoverpolitics.org. That's Lewis's activism website, and basically you can find out everything you need to know about him there. You can watch the full presentation. And then the only other question I have, Lewis, is, can you appear pro hoc vice in Albany and tell Governor Cuomo what the F is up?
Which case is this? Because I'm losing track.
The case of him shutting down New York City and telling everybody they can't go outside of their apartments without wearing a mask. What if somebody has asthma and the mask restricts their breathing and causes them medical difficulties?
Well, you would think that they would come to their senses, and you wouldn't have to sue them, to effectuate that change. Unfortunately, we have to be very cautious, especially those who understand how the system works. Litigators. We don't want to create bad precedent. Okay, and you see it happen all the time. People may be completely right. They may have a black and white, open and shut case. But for whatever reason, the fix is in. And next thing you know, you have a case like the 2011, Dershowitz case, which ultimately, seals the deal for the vaccine, compensation program continuing. So, I think we have to be, looking at every avenue of recourse, not just executive order or a lawsuit. I think we have to explore them all. And legislatively, I think we can actually have a meaningful impact if we had the numbers, the strength in numbers to actually repeal 1986, which I think is necessary. You have to repeal that law because then the court can no longer use it as a way to punt these cases out of the court system and bring back the right to a jury trial, and not just to vaccine injuries. Okay, it's there's a whole slew of if you go back to common law actions that have been completely exempted or removed from the jury system. So arbitration. Look at how arbitration has completely deformed our system. But even like medical malpractice, in places like Florida, now you got to jump through hoops. Like, for example, if you want to sue a doctor in Florida, you have to find a doctor that says that what that doctor did was malpractice. I mean, how many doctors are there that will actually say that? Go against
another doctor, right?
And while we're on the topic of doctors, I know we don't have a lot of time, but look at the Johns Hopkins study, okay? Because the 2016 Johns Hopkins study is something that everybody in this country should be talking about, because the reality is, and you want to look at the pandemic, whatever you want to call it, okay? Even considering what the stats that they give you are, which we know are not accurate. But even if you accept them as true and you say that this is how many deaths there are today, whatever it is on the little counter, you go look at it, do the math, okay? You're still more likely to be killed by a doctor or a hospital by mistake in the United States. They kill over 250,000 people a year, okay? And that's not up for debate. So when we think about mandatory vaccination, let's also talk about the doctors. Let's talk about their responsibility, and let's talk about informed consent. Let's talk about the principles that doctors have, right? Because what's the first rule that they're taught?
Do no harm.
First, do no harm, right? And when did that change? Okay, I must have missed a meeting, but this is something we need to have a serious talk about. And I think that the media, and I really appreciate what you're doing, Jason, to talk about this, because, I think most people are afraid to talk about it. And it's very controversial. It results in not only, so much negative, toxic backlash from people who believe in these products or, trust their doctor. But it also is subject of a lot of censorship. And I mean, if you look at what happened to the doctors in California, who they weren't even talking about vaccination. They were just talking about their raw data from the COVID, patients that they had, and they were censored. This is an ABC, right? It was an ABC, I think, who interviewed them, the doctors in Bakersfield, and they deleted that from YouTube. And honestly, I want to see more from Trump. If people, they love Trump, they think he's like the savior. Let's see him take on these social media giants in court for not just censorship, right? Let's start applying federal laws like 18 U.S. Code 1512. Take a look at that. Tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant. Okay, because there's a really terrifying story about a gentleman. He was a UFC fighter who posted his experience with vaccination on Facebook, and Facebook banned him. Okay. They're banning people's stories. They're banning people's experiences. These are witnesses, okay? If you think about it, when you delete or you tamper with anyone's statement, like a witness, for example, and prevent it from being used in an official proceeding, I don't even think you have to prevent it from being used. You just have to, actually, delete it or interfere with, or even, you could just attempt to interfere with the person or try to, this is of course federal criminal law, by the way.
Right.
If you look at this statute, and there's others, these are things that the U.S. attorneys could use if they wanted to curb censorship in a way that people probably aren't thinking about. Everybody thinks about like defamation or these civil suits, but there's also criminal laws that are there to protect people from censorship, not just online. Okay, so I think we need to really not rule anything out when it comes to avenues of recourse, especially when we're talking about poisoning people for profit. And I think we need to see more from attorneys who took oaths to protect the Constitution.
Yes, we need more.
Well said.
People helping us. Okay, I mean, this Lewis, is the guy who's actually working every day to protect civil liberties in this country, and he's actually getting victories. Okay, in the Palm Beach, I think that's there's going to be more victories down the road. Not Alan Dershowitz. Okay, Alan Dershowitz is a media puppet. He cares nothing for the civil liberties of regular people in the society, and there are a lot of other lawyers like him who are the hand maidens of corporations and oligarchs and what have you. But there are lawyers out there who are actually fighting the good fight, and we're in the trenches. But man, it's hard. We need more support. So we need more lawyers to step up to the plate. I totally agree.
And not just to sue, like if you see, I mean, I all I did was walk into a commissioner meeting and just talk about the law.
Yeah, exactly.
Just tell them how we're feeling, and explain, what's going on, because these people don't see it. Okay, these county commissioners, the city council members, a lot of these people live maybe on the beach, and they haven't been prohibited from using it. Okay, so they don't even feel the effects of their own rulemaking. So it's important that you participate in that process and let them know what's up.
I hate to say it, but lawyers in this country as a class are wuss bags. I mean, they're they're timid. They're afraid of stepping on toes. They're afraid of taking positions that are gonna, they believe, hurt them down the road. And it's very sad. I think it used to be a very noble profession in this country. There were people like Clarence Darrow who stood up in court and defended the rights of the accused and made a lot of important developments in the history of this country. But it's largely become a profession that's governed by fear and conformity. And I hate to say it, and money. And lawyers like Lewis are very, very rare, but we desperately need more of them. And hopefully we're going to see people who are graduating from law school now. Maybe they can't get jobs at the big firms because they're all firing people left and right.
Right.
There's no more work as the economy is at a standstill. Well, maybe that'll be a good thing. And these people put these new law graduates will put their law degrees to good use, because we could sure use some reinforcement when we go into court or whatever forum, and try to stand up for what's being destroyed before our very eyes.
I got to thank both of you guys for the work that you're doing towards this end, and it's just fantastic and amazing. And Jared, thank you so much for introducing
Jason, if
me.
I could just say,
yeah, please.
Jason, if I could just say one thing before we go, because
Sure.
we didn't talk about it, and I really wanted to mention it.
Yeah.
Was it's something I had sent you those 3 things about Florida law that I don't think Dershowitz knew. I'm actually looking for my email here, but I think that obviously the most important one is Florida stand your ground law. Okay, I don't think Dershowitz understands how that works, but if he thinks that the government or anybody has the right to plunge poison into my body or into my children's body, I really would like to see them try. Okay. Because this is a stand your ground state, and people need to understand that that's a very
Tell us
powerful.
what that means.
Ultimately, and it's not just that when you're in your home. If somebody threatens you with force, including deadly force, or they there it is right there, right? Chapter 776.
You can kill them.
You can use force, including deadly force, to protect not only yourself but others. Okay, so I think people need to understand that, and they understand that nobody has the right to go and poison you, and if somebody tries to, stand your ground. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing a message I could deliver today for people. And granted, look, that law applies only in Florida, so know your state's self-defense laws.
Right.
And I think it's important because the government's not going to protect you. The police aren't going to come protect you, especially when you're in the doctor's office and you're dealing with somebody who has other reasons, bonuses or whatever they're getting to have a fully vaccinated, patient or something. I mean, you have to protect yourself, and do the research, because you can't trust these people. You can't trust the third leading cause of death in the country.
Well, not only will the police not protect you in the doctor's office, according to Mr. Dershowitz, they're going to take you there and plunge that needle in. So it's been an amazingly eye-opening conversation. I have to thank both of you tremendously. People can learn more about some of these topics that Lewis is sharing with us by going to peopleoverpolitics.org. You can see some of the videos of his activism, and including that amazing speech that he gave there to the local government. I also want to thank Jared Beck. If people are looking for a trial lawyer in South Florida, you can go to beckandlee.com. Everybody knows that Jared and Elizabeth are the founders of Beck and Lee. Elizabeth was with us just last week talking about another horrible, forcible medical procedure that was applied to their dear mother. Glad to hear she's doing better. Please say hi to Elizabeth and to your mother-in-law. We'll have to have you back very soon, Lewis. I know people are really interested in what you're talking about, and this is a critical time right now. We cannot wait on this stuff. So thank you for all of that information, and I wish the two of you safety, health, and the best of luck And I want to thank everybody for watching. I want to remind people I cannot bring you guests like Lewis and Jared without your support and sponsorship. So please visit subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. You're going to get access to a huge and constantly growing library of sponsor-exclusive content, and you enable me to keep bringing you shows like this, even if you're watching just on YouTube. So we're going to keep a close eye on President Trump's executive order, see how that moves on down the line, and I will speak to both of you gentlemen very soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Jason.
you, Jason.
Thanks, everybody, for watching. Have a great night.